and I wanted to do a video just explaining a little bit about Carl Rogers' theory of human development, because it's kind of complicated, and I thought it'd be useful just to spend a few minutes talking it through. So where Rogers starts with is the idea of the organism coming into the world with the kind of experiencing as this kind of whole being that experiences the world, and infants having this kind of complete gestalt sense of the world as it is, and no kind of differentiation between self and other. Lots of other developmental theorists have said this as well. There's just a sense of being, experiencing. Remember, Rogers' theory is very phenomenological, and that means it's really about experiencing, and it starts with experiencing. So you imagine this infant just experiencing this world around it, no differentiation, no sense of me or others, just feeling love and warmth and care or fear or anxiety, and just having this very holistic gestalt experience. Now, out of that, what starts to happen is that there's more differentiation, and others have written about this, people like Daniel Stone, the kind of sense of self emerging, so that it starts to, the infant starts to know what's me and associate things with itself. And then on the other hand, what is not me and things around me, the world and self, starts to differentiate. And that's kind of, Rogers talks about this is mainly from his 1959 paper that he also outlines in the 1951. The 1959 one is a kind of, Brian Thorne always said to me, that's a really key text. It's in the Koch book, K-O-C-H. Study of scientific personality. I can't remember what it's called, but look it up, and it's a really key Rogers text in 1959. But it's also in 1951 client-centered therapy. So then you have this infant. So you imagine this infant, and it has a sense of self, and it has a sense of other. Now, this infant has within it, really important, this is really important, it has this kind of organismic valuing potential. And what that means is that the infant knows kind of what is right for it. It experiences, if there's something scary, it experiences fear. If there's something pleasurable, it experiences happiness. Rogers, as a humanist, very much starts from the position that we have an innate sense of what is growthful and maintaining for us. That's the actualizing tendency as expressed in this organismic valuing potential, this sense of what is maintaining and what is enhancing. Two key elements: maintaining and then also enhancing, what enhances the organism. But we live in this world of conditional positive regard. Now, what does conditional positive regard mean? It means that we live in a world where others judge our experiences. Now, that's really key, really important. It's not about judging our behaviours. It's not about people saying, oh, it's a bad thing if you murder someone. No one in the person-centered field is saying that we should live in a world that just says everything's good. It's about our experiencing. So our feelings of anger, or our feelings perhaps of fear. And conditional positive regard means that people judge our experiences. They say things like, it's not okay to be angry, or boys shouldn't feel fear, or girls shouldn't feel jealousy. That some experiences, some of our internal experiences are judged as good, and some of them as bad. And Rogers argues that we need positive regard. We need people to like it. He's not very clear about why, actually. I think that's one of the holes in his theory, is that he's not very clear about why we need positive regard. But he says that we do, and that because we need positive regard, we develop what's called a regard complex. A regard complex is kind of a sense of what others in the world will regard us for in terms of our experiences. For instance, we realise that people won't particularly value us if we experience fear. A boy might learn that, if I feel afraid, if I feel vulnerable, which, remember, these are kind of natural actualizing feelings that the boy has of vulnerability or fear. But he learns that others in the world are going to judge him for that, and that's the regard complex. And then what Rogers talks about is that getting internalized, so that we have this over here, this kind of introjection and assimilation, that the boy comes to feel for himself that it's good if I maybe experience a kind of competitiveness, for instance, and it's good if I feel superiority. But if I feel inferior, then people won't like me for having that experience, and so that regard complex becomes introjected or assimilated. And that means some of the infants' experiences, the self-experiences, are associated with positive self-regard. As I was saying, you know, a boy might feel that, you know, it's good when I win. You know, that's a good feeling and I like it. And when I feel competitive and win or strong, those are all good feelings. And those are things that I feel good about myself about. But there's other feelings like maybe vulnerability, or with girls, for instance, because of socialization, maybe anger, that feel like it's bad. I'm a bad person for having those experiences. So we learn about what is experiencing that is good or bad. And remember, we're talking about experiences here. We're not talking about behaviors. We're talking about something much more fundamental, which is that we learn that the way that we experience the world is good or bad. Now, we need positive regard. We need positive self-regard. We need to like ourselves as well. And that means that we start to seek out those experiences and symbolize and acknowledge those experiences which make us feel good about ourselves. So a boy starts to kind of try and experience that kind of sense of winning, that sense of victory, and really recognizes that, yeah, I'm great, I'm doing really well. But the vulnerability, which becomes these kind of unacknowledged self-experiences, are the parts of the experiential field. If you think you've got this whole big experiential field, and the unacknowledged self-experiences are those parts of the self that are experienced, but because the boy has come to associate those with negative self-regard and negative regard from others, he does what Rogers calls subseason, which is a bit like kind of keeping them in the unconscious. Doesn't acknowledge those experiences. They're just kind of there, but pushed away. So the boy pushes away his feelings of vulnerability. Or he pushes away his feelings of maybe sensitivity. You know, being a boy is being strong and being tough, and it's those experiences, not the kind of sensitivity or the hurt, feeling hurt by others. And that becomes, and through that, he comes, or the infant comes to develop a sense of self. And the self is essentially those self-experiences associated with positive self-regard. So things like I'm strong, tough, competitive, and that then the other experiences are unacknowledged. Now, when Rogers talks about the self, really he's talking about the self-concept. He's talking about how we think about ourselves rather than some kind of solid kind of thing like self. Because, of course, remember, Rogers is a phenomenologist, and that means that he doesn't really see human beings in terms of some kind of thing-like entity. It's much more about the flow of being. We have this flow of being, and as part of that flow of being, we create an understanding of who we are, and that's our self, or our self-concept. Another part of the kind of picture is that Rogers takes from something called Lecky this idea that we need self-consistency, that we want to have a kind of consistent sense of self. And that means that idea of who we are, that sense of self, becomes more and more solidified, ossified, if you like. And we form, so as we kind of hit our kind of later childhood, we have this kind of quite definite sense of self, of who we are, who I am as a person. Which is very much based for Rogers around what we've learned is valued by the culture, by the people that we're in, and denies other parts of ourselves. So, you know, girls, for instance, see themselves nice and kind and friendly and loving. And it's not that that isn't true, that's part of them, but that is only part of them. There's also maybe the anger, the rage, the jealousy, that because they've learned those aren't good experiences, they've come to subsede. They've come to not acknowledge. So now, why is that a problem? You know, why is that a bad thing? And Rogers talks about the kind of this basic alienation, this estrangement that the person has from their whole experiencing. But why is that a problem? Why is it a problem to be estranged from that? Well, if you remember that those experiences, say for the girl, the anger or the envy or jealousy or the rage, or for the boy, maybe the vulnerability, or, you know, and obviously it'd be different in different cultures and different families. But remember, those are part of the organism which is striving to actualize its experiencing. So if those parts are denied, you know, if a boy denies his vulnerability, that vulnerability is there because it's telling him something important about how to be in the world. It's part of his natural guide, his natural compass, if you like. It's like kind of ignoring a compass, for instance. So he might do something like risk taking and be more risky than he might really want to be because he's not acknowledging that there's that fear. Or perhaps he puts himself in relationships, or he's quite kind of abrasive and brash, when actually his more natural tendencies would be towards something softer. That these qualities within him, that are these kind of key messages, or the girl's anger, that she's got every right to be angry. Maybe she's been treated really unfairly. Maybe her brothers are getting something that she's not known. She feels angry about it. And that anger serves to maintain and enhance herself. And if she's subsuming it, if she's suppressing it, it means that she's not being able to move forward as well in her life as she naturally wouldn't be able to. So that there's something that gets lost, something very fundamental about us that gets lost if we suppress, if we subseive these parts of ourselves. And also, there's the other part of it is that there's also the anxiety, because at some level we know that those things are really there. The girl knows that at some level she does feel angry and resentful and envious, and then she feels bad about that. She feels like, I shouldn't be like that. So there's kind of anxiety of feeling that these parts of the self are always threatening to emerge. And then there's also maybe the shame, the guilt, or of having those feelings. So well-being from that standpoint is about being able to really acknowledge who we are, the totality of who we are, to be with a wholeness of ourselves. And that means that by accepting ourselves, and of course that's the role of therapy, is to help us do that, means that we don't feel that shame, we don't feel that anxiety of who am I. It means that we can access those parts of ourselves and utilize them. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be happy all the time, but it does mean that we're going to be whole, less self-alienated, more of a total person. As I was saying, therapy and person-centered therapy is, we can think about it very much as trying to help that journey. What it does is it presents a accepting, valuing, empathic relationship in which the therapist can really stand alongside the client in how they genuinely experience their world. Not just how they say they are, but in terms of what those actual experiences are. Help them unpack those experiences. And through that attitude of positive regard, the client could come to internalize for themselves more of an acceptance of their actual experiences and come back to being whole again. Thank you for listening.